Hello and welcome to our conversation with Barracuda. I'm Alex Raven, CMO of CoolSpirit, and I welcome along with me Steve Peake, Pre-Sales Manager of Barracuda. During the next 10 minutes or so, we'll be discussing the rise of web-based applications and how to secure them and the access to them, which is going to be a really interesting conversation. So let's get started straight away. Hi, Steve, how are you?
Hi, Alex. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Good, yeah. So I'll dive into the first question. Steve, we see many organizations now employ SaaS-based applications for their critical day-to-day sharing and communications with suppliers and customers, for example. We see it all the time. Do you see this also?
Yeah, we do. As a security company, we are seeing more and more organizations move to SaaS for consumption of our own services, but also actually move to SaaS for many different aspects of their sort of the day-to-day running. So I think one of the easiest ways to realize this is actually if we think about our own day-to-day lives. We used to go to the GP and go and request an appointment, or we'd pick up the phone. Now we do it through a portal and we book an appointment. We would go and maybe we'd maybe go to the shops, and go and actually physically pick something up. Now we all go onto Amazon and press the deliver it to me button. But we see this more and more. You think about your grocery shopping as well. Grocery shopping. My mum and dad, they'd get in the car, they'd go and do their big shop on a Friday. Now we do it online and the man comes to the door. All of these are applications. All of these applications we're using are systems that are storing data, and they're very much about making sure that we can communicate efficiently and more quickly in the busy world that we live in. And so really what we've seen is the growth of this over, particularly as the pandemic hit. It brought in, if you like, the organizations that were considering online working, accelerated their process and turn project around in weeks instead of months and years. And so it really has accelerated, and we've definitely seen a huge growth in that area.
Yeah, I think you're right to say not only in your personal life in a commercial world, for example, but in a business environment, it's very much been there to bring people together who are far away from each other, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this recording. It's over a SaaS platform. We have business to business interactions going on, whether that's a drink supplier ordering their raw materials, whether it's a car manufacturer who's got the dealership who's putting the placing in the order for the new car that we want. It's if you think about how these interactions work all the way through, right the way through to a consumer when we're buying, all the way through to the supplier, to the delivery, and right the way through the manufacturing chain. There is business to business applications everywhere, and these commonly nowadays use web-based technologies to interact with each other.
I think that brings me on to my next question, really. You mentioned, essentially it's data that's being hosted somewhere. So how can these organizations protect the websites and the apps, which stand in front of this data, which are critical to businesses today?
Yeah, I think saying it's really an evolving market. Application security is something that businesses historically have never really either understood or had the time to understand, I think is probably fair. And so what businesses traditionally done is they've gone and said, I've got a firewall. My firewall only allows you into my application. My application is safe. Well, actually, when we think about what an application holds, there are now a whole raft of attacks that I can use as an attacker, that if your application is vulnerable to these type of attacks, they could expose, for instance, the database that's behind that application. That database may contain usernames and passwords, it may contain credit card details, it may contain key customer data, key supplier data. Well, that data is now valuable. So as an attacker, no longer am I thinking, right, I want to go and try and hack your firewall. Firewalls do their job nowadays. What organizations need to consider is, how do I protect the application as well? And that really is where web application firewalling comes in. And that's really a technology that would sit in front of their applications monitor for the types of attacks that applications can be vulnerable to. There's a framework called the OWASP Top 10. That is the top 10 type of attacks that are used against applications. A web application firewall would help protect against those type of attacks, as an example, and many more. But really, it's about getting that protection layer and really defending against what could ultimately be a bit dodgy code or accidental gaps within the application code itself.
I guess with the rise of web-based front ends, it's not, it's different to having on-prem hosted applications where a user just connects to it through a full fat client or something like that. So there's a lot more awareness needed, isn't there, really, on the web-based application and what's possible, what possible vulnerabilities are, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great example. I mean, as an example, Barracuda's web application firewall now runs as a service. It's hosted in the cloud because actually that data can be anywhere. But actually, come back to that point about interaction. If you think about your mobile phone has a bunch of apps on it. Those apps are communicating somewhere to a server, somewhere, an application using web technology. And so we're carrying around a device nowadays in our pocket that has access to these services that are hosted somewhere in the world. It's like you say, it's moved from that internal aspect of, I know that, CoolSPIRiT and Barracuda are communicating and that's it. Actually, it could be anyone, anywhere. And that is the reality of the world we live in today. Connectivity and access to data is key.
What steps can organizations take to understand the risk to their applications?
So this is a conversation I have very frequently when we talk about web application firewalling. And you would think that actually as a software vendor and a solution vendor for this type of scenario, that we're actually straight away talking about technology. But the reality is we're not. The questions that come across to the customers from ourselves are the likes of, do you know what interfaces you have exposed to the internet? So have you got business to business interactions exposed? Have you got public facing web portals exposed? Have you got retail e-commerce type of system exposed? So you got all these different types of interfaces. And really the first point is for a customer to know what they are. Once they know what they are, they then need to consider, what level of protection do I need for those? So for a brochureware website, as an example, which is just a few pictures advertising your brand, well, actually the level of protection needed will be very low. However, come back to that e-commerce website. Well, if that e-commerce website is looking at transactions, it's taking maybe credit card payments, then you may have compliance such as PCI DSS to hit. And what that means is actually that you've got a specific compliance set of rules you have to meet to ultimately be able to have that certification and say, I can take that type of data. Now, where this is, if you like, I've talked about a very much a specific market there, but many organizations have cyber insurance. Yeah, and cyber insurance nowadays is actually starting to set a minimum set of requirements. So a bit like your car insurance, you must have your license, you must have MOT and tax, etc., or your insurance is invalid. That is exactly how cyber insurance is going. And putting web application firewalling in front of your applications is becoming not an advanced requirement, but actually a base requirement of policies today. So it's really important that organizations not only look at what they've got published, but also what's the criteria they have to meet around the compliance and the legislation side of their organization as well.
And ultimately meet their insurance requirements.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like you secure a physical building, you need to secure your web applications.
Exactly that.
You mentioned web applications and changing the way we work. How has remote working also impacted this, would you say?
So I guess remote working is moving slightly out of that web application world. So web applications are the technologies we're consuming. But what we've also seen is access to those web applications needs to be considered. So for instance, if I'm an organization, I've had to send all my staff home to work from home. And actually, we think that's going to stay around nowadays. It's probably going to lead into some hybrid working model. Well, I've now got the challenge as an IT individual of making sure my services are safe and accessible, both when they're in my office, but also out at their own location. So what we've seen is organizations very quickly and swiftly move their staff to using the likes of VPN technology. So VPN technology, great, it gives you access. The challenge there is you've got an access direct into the network. And that means that actually I can go and snoop. I can go and maybe see beyond where I should be. So what we've seen is an evolution of where people have come back, if you like, to revisit this issue now as the pandemic is if you like, the norm. And what we've seen is the evolution of what we call zero trust network access. And zero trust network access is the concept that I present to you the applications you require to do your job and don't give you access for anything else. And so remote working is very much evolving into what do I need to publish to my staff nowadays, rather than here's a connection, go away, connect up, and away we go.
You've made some really valid points there, and thanks ever so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great, Alex. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.